Joining us next, our guest is a journalist and an author of not one or two, but 7 New York Times bestsellers. He began his career as a Yale Law School graduate, working in politics for the US government. He was a speechwriter for Al Gore and also wrote his experience in his first book, The Free Agent Nation. And since then, our next guest has written 6 more bestsellers. You must have heard of them: Drive, To Sell is Human, The Whole New Mind. He's one of the world's most in-demand speakers with more than 1,200 lectures in 6 continents. And with his latest book, The Power of Regret, he's here to reveal why most successful people don't live with regret. Welcome to the Moneycontrol Global Wealth Summit. This is Daniel Pink.
Hello. Good evening. Good morning. It's 5:30 in the morning where I am in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
All right. Thank you so much, Daniel, for joining us bright and early over there. Now, you know, your book on regret has very different meanings for everybody. But here, every leader, every investor, every entrepreneur sitting in this audience has faced regret. You know,
Sure.
Things like they must be feeling right now about regret would be, oh, I did not bet on Nvidia. Oh, I sold an ITC stock really early. Oh, I didn't cash in on that Bitcoin rally. So how do these people, the wealth creators of India, how do they not see regret as a failure? And what I'm really trying to ask you and to translate in their language would be, if regret were a stock, why are you betting on it?
Oh, because if regret were a stock, I would bet on it because its long-term returns, when invested in properly, are massive. And this is a great way to look at it, Sonal. Let's stick with your metaphor here for a moment, okay? So regret is that feeling that we have when we look backward and wish we had done something or wish we hadn't done something. It's a painful emotion. And our goal, what we might think, is that we want to avoid regret at all costs, and that if we feel regret, we should just ignore it because we don't want to wallow in it. And that's not quite right. What we should think of is that regret is an emotion that is functional. It's adaptive. It has a purpose. And if we think about all of our emotions, here's where I'm going to stick with your metaphor. Let's think about all of the emotions that we have as human beings as a portfolio. And in your portfolio of emotions, you want to have a lot of positive emotions. You want to have more positive emotions than negative emotions. If you're interested in long-term growth, you have more equity than debt in your portfolio. But you don't want to have only positive emotions. That's not diversified enough. And you want to have some negative emotions because negative emotions are functional. So would you want to if I offered anybody in this audience an operation and said, I will eliminate fear, you will no longer experience fear, which is a negative emotion. Don't take that offer because fear is functional. You want to get out of a burning building. Think about something like grief. Grief is functional. It reminds us why we love. And so the most prominent negative emotion we have is regret. And the reason that we have it is because it can help us make better decisions in the future.
I see. Interesting. But, you know, financial loss is more than just regret, right? It's a direct, immediate hit on the pocket. Unlike, say, an emotional regret, a friend you don't speak to or a father you don't call very often, financial regrets aren't like an egg you can unscramble. So currently, when the markets are so volatile right now in India, what's your advice on coping with financial regret?
Well, I think you have to think about, I think what we need to do as healthy human beings, whether we're investing or whether we're parents or anything, is regretting the right thing. And what we should be regretting are a lot of times we regret the outcome. Okay? So let's take an example here. If I want to go out for a run outside and it is raining and I can't go out for a run, I can't regret that. That's not regret. That is disappointment. That's something that I have control over. And so you can only regret things that you have control over. And as you know, as you were talking about a moment ago, this market is volatile. The idea that you have control over the outcomes of all of your investments is a fool's game. What you want to do is you want to make smart decisions over a large portfolio in a long period of time, and over time, that's going to work out for you. But if you regret every outcome, then you end up making worse decisions. You want to focus on evaluating the decision rather than the outcome. That is absolutely the key, because there are stocks that go up, there are stocks that go down, but you want to make sure if you didn't invest in NVIDIA and you had a good reason for doing it, then interrogate that decision, see what you can learn if that was truly a mistake. But you know what? Sometimes things are random. We know that very well from the stock market, and that's one reason that we diversify.
That's fascinating. But in your book, Daniel, you've surveyed people, you've spoken to them. There are lots of patterns that have emerged. Could you point out for us if you've noticed any regional differences, for example, in how business leaders, investors show regret or face regret, say Silicon Valley versus India? Is there a difference in pattern?
Yeah. There actually are. So I collected regrets from over 26,000 people in 134 countries. And in part to answer that question exactly. We had the survey in multiple languages. And what I found, to my surprise, is that there were not that many regional differences. Very, very few. And when you look at business leaders around the world, what you see is their biggest regret is not being bold enough. Not being bold enough. Especially when you look at people's... So one is not being bold enough for business leaders, not being bold enough. I wanted to take this chance, but I was too scared to do it, and now I regret it. You have some people who act boldly and it doesn't work out for them, and they regret that. But for every person who acts boldly and it doesn't work out, there are probably 40 or 50 who say, I wish I had acted more boldly. The other thing that you see sometimes with business leaders is some moral regrets. I was at a juncture in my career, and I could have done the right thing or the wrong thing. I could have taken the high road morally or the low road morally, and most people, including most business leaders, regret over time not acting morally. So be bold and be good is really the lesson that comes from that.
That's interesting. But, another emotion you often see in the markets, on the lines of regret at least, is FOMO. Isn't fear of missing out also sort of regret in real time? How can decision makers avoid being paralyzed by what could have been and focus more on what can be? How do you deal with that?
Well, what you do is when you have a regret, so this is important, when you have a regret, what you should do is that you should not ignore it. That's a bad idea. And a lot of times, especially in America, we're told, don't worry about your regret, stew in it, wallow in it. What you should be doing, and I think the investors in the audience can be very good at this, is look at your regret as data, as information. All right? What is this regret telling me? What it is so let's say that I didn't invest in NVIDIA, 5 years ago, and I regret doing that. Okay, what did I miss? What did I miss? I missed that artificial intelligence was going to be a big deal, and you needed some company to supply the chips to do that. All right, great. So that's data. That's what I learned from it. Now I'm going to extract a lesson from that. What's the lesson? The lesson is that I should be paying more attention to macro trends in the economy in the future. That's my lesson. My lesson isn't let's go chase the next AI stock. The lesson is what I missed was that I wasn't looking at large secular macro trends, and those were powering certain kinds of companies. So now what I should be doing is looking at the current, what is currently the large secular macro trends. What, for instance, are going to be the effect of especially in places like the United States, Western Europe, and Japan, of an aging population and not enough replacement there. That's a big, massive secular trend. What can I do to take advantage of that?
All right. So, Daniel, in your research, there are lots of important points and lots of patterns that have emerged which are very curious to understand. And I just want to sort of turn one leaf on that. In business, in love, in life, what do people regret more? Is it not doing things or doing things? What is a larger form of regret that really crops up?
Okay, this is both a profound question. It's a profound question that you asked, and it's actually an easy question to answer, because this one is not even close. Around the world, people regret inactions more than actions. And it's not even close. And here, now I mentioned that there weren't a lot of national differences. I did some work, quantitative work in the U.S., looking at demographic differences in the U.S. on gender, on race, and things like that. There were very few there too. But the one big demographic difference was age. And what you saw is that people in their 20s, this is American data, but I think it applies to the rest of the world. People in their 20s had about equal numbers of regrets of action and inaction. People in their 20s. People in their 30s had more inaction regrets than action regrets. By the time you get to your 40s, 50s, 60s, it's not even close. It's so not even close. It is 3-to-1, 4-to-1 inaction regrets over action regrets. What people regret over time is what they didn't do. This is so clear in all the literature on regret. I didn't tell my partner that I loved her. I didn't reach out to a friend. I didn't speak up at work for something that matters. I didn't take a big shot in my business. I wasn't entrepreneurial enough. Those are the things that people regret over time.
Right. It's interesting you bring in age, but I often think that regret is something that creeps in only later in life. Because early on, you're too sort of curious, restless to try things on, and that zeal sort of fades away. Is that true?
Yes and no. There's the other reason so first of all, older people, they do have regrets, but a lot of their action regrets, a lot of the regrets of action, what they did, many of those actually fade away. People make peace with it. They put it into context. What sticks with people over time are those things that they didn't do. Because if I do, let's say I hurt somebody and I regret doing that, I can make amends. I can go back and cure that. But with an inaction regret, I can't do anything about it. I think the big reason that younger people might have fewer regrets, logical reason is that their past is shorter. So they have less to, regret is you're looking back into your past. And when you're 20, your past is this long. When you're my age, your past is this long.
Okay, interesting. So, there are a lot of entrepreneurs here in our audience today listening into you. And this session has been a bit of a breakaway from the regular conversation on wealth creation, etc., that we've been having all day long. But if you were to give them advice, if you were to talk to first-generation entrepreneurs, wealth creators, how would you tell them to harness regret? Because what you are saying, what your book says, is against what any of the leaders or any of the aspirators that they have been saying. They look at successful people who say, I don't have regrets. Warren Buffett says, I don't have regrets. But you are saying, own it.
I am. And what I'm saying, anybody who tells you they don't have regrets is not telling you the truth. What we know from 60 years of evidence is the only people who don't have regrets are 5-year-olds because their brains haven't developed the capacity to do counterfactual thinking, people with neurodegenerative diseases, certain kinds, and sociopaths. Everybody else has regret. Around the world, it's one of the most common emotions. The key is what you do with it. And I think especially for the investors and entrepreneurs in your audience, the key is to, as I said before, is to use it as data and use it. What is this regret telling me? When you have that emotion, it's a signal. What's a signal? It could be a signal that I need to be bolder in the future. It could be a signal that I need to be more connected to other people in the future. It could be a signal that I need to act more properly in the future. One of the things that we see is that around the world, people have certain kinds of regrets all over the world. And what it yields is a set of lessons. Because when people tell you what they regret the most, they tell you what they value the most. And what people regret is not doing the work. What people regret is not acting boldly. What people regret is not being good. And what people regret is not being in close relationships, connected relationships with people they care about. And so that gives us a clue. Do the work. Take the shot, do the right thing, and when in doubt, reach out to others.
Sounds so simple when you say it, but so difficult to implement.
That's because the goal is not perfection. The goal is being better. The goal is trying to do a little bit better today than you did yesterday. And I actually think that especially the talented people in the room where you're in can absolutely do these things. And I think what's also important for the leaders in the audience is to talk about your regrets.
Right.
Tell your team, here's something I regret, here's what I learned from it, here's what I'm going to do about it.
Yeah. So key takeaways from what you've just said is that more people in the world regret not doing overdoing. They regret not being bold enough, and they regret more of their moral decisions over anything else, which is very, very interesting. But, the thing, Daniel, with regret is, where do you draw the line? Once you go down that path of understanding what went wrong, it's difficult to surface again. And that's the reason why people shut it down. So where does one draw the line?
Well, so first of all, the idea that you should treat yourself when you have a regret, you should treat yourself with kindness rather than contempt. A lot of times when we make mistakes, the way we talk to ourselves is brutal and cruel. And what the research tells us is that that's not effective. It might feel like you're being a badass by being cruel to yourself, but it doesn't improve your performance. So what you should do is treat yourself with kindness rather than contempt. There's a strong case to be made for talking about or writing about your regret. But the most important thing here is this. I want to come back to this because these investors can understand this. It's a signal. It's a market signal. It's telling you something. And you need to listen to it and then say, what lesson is this teaching me? And what should I do next in response to that? And when we do that, we have piles of evidence showing that when people treat regret that way, they become better negotiators. They're less likely to avoid. They're better problem solvers. It is a way to avoid cognitive biases like confirmation bias and escalation of commitment to a failing course of action, which bedevil both of which bedevil investors. It can help make you a better strategist. And so the key here is not to spend a lot of your time in regret just because for the same reason that in your portfolio, you're going to have way less debt than equity if you want to grow over the long time. But you want to have a little bit because it's functional. It helps you grow. And if we treat this painful emotion as a source of information, as a source of data, as a signal, we have evidence from around the world that it helps make you better at your job, better at your life.
Regret makes you better. Well, that's a good one to go for. But, if I were to use another market analogy or perhaps a finance analogy over here, would you say then that regret is like compound interest, painful early, but valuable in the long run?
Could be. I think that's not a bad way to look at it. I think the harder regrets that people have are the regrets that compound. So if you look at like individual investors, if you look at individuals, it's like, people who say I spent too much and saved too little and now I don't have enough money. That's a function of compounding. But yeah, no, I think that regret, especially regrets of inaction can compound. That's why they stick around for so long. That's why people in their 60s and 70s have regrets of inaction and not that many of action. Because the regret of inaction, what I didn't do, I didn't speak up, I didn't take the chance, I wasn't bold, that sticks with you. And goes up 6% every year, which means it doubles in 12 years, right? So I think there is a good argument for that.
I see. Daniel, lots of more questions, but I have to end by asking you about what has been your biggest regret, apart from, of course, not being here in person. Apart from that, what has been your biggest regret in life?
In life, my biggest regret was that is a regret of kindness. Is a regret of kindness. That earlier in my life, I wasn't as kind as I could be to other people. I wasn't a bully, but there were many situations where people were not being treated well. People were being left out. I saw it. I knew it was wrong, and I didn't do anything. And that really bothers me. And so now the question is, I can beat myself up and say, you're a terrible person. You're all awful. Bad idea. I can say, don't worry about that. It's in the past. Also a bad idea. Or I can say, wow, things that happened 30, 40 years ago still bug me. That's telling me something. It's telling me that I value kindness and that in the future, I should treat people with compassion, treat people kindly. And if people are being left out, then I have an obligation to bring them in.
Daniel Ping, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your thoughts. And this book is one that provokes a lot of thought. Thank you so much. Daniel Ping, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.